Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get. She's confused. Good morning. We'll convene the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee meeting, and the first item is our roll call. So I'll call on Amy to do that.
Chair Fiedler,
Present.
Supervisor Leaf,
Present.
Supervisor Adams is excused today, Supervisor Carlson,
Present.
Supervisor Ramberg.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, and welcome to Amy Lessman. Amy is substituting the last month, while our longtime support staff, Janet Smith, has been absent on medical leave, and we wish Janet the very best. I've been following her progress on Caring Bridge, and she's made great progress over the last month after a severe medical issue about a month ago. And so we wish Janet all the best. And thank you, Amy, for all you've done to get us ready for today. Next item we have would be approval of our minutes from our last meeting. Can I have a motion for that?
I'll make the motion.
Supervisor Ramberg moves adoption of those minutes. Is there a second? And Supervisor Carlson seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, they're adopted. Public comment. Do we have any members of the public who would like to address the committee today? Any members of the public? Any members of the public? We will have members of the public addressing us when we get to some items on the agenda, but we'll do that when we get to that item on the agenda. Our first business item is, I'll call on the County Administrator, Mr. Witt, for the financial report.
I was just waiting to sync. So the financial report is in the packet. It's through the month of February. So we're 2/12 of the year in, so we're still under budget. And that's really about the amount of excitement that we
We love financial reports now.
Yeah, I know. They're easy at the beginning of the year, and they get tougher as the year goes on. But, you know, even looking at percentage-wise, there isn't anything big. There aren't any anomalies that have come up this early in the year yet. So we're on target. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions if you saw something in the financial reports, but it's all pretty routine at this point.
We're not going to dwell on it because we're going to be having a committee of the whole meeting about a week from now on April 12th. But I would just note that we had a referendum a couple of days ago, and there was a public safety issue on there that failed to pass. So that will require this committee, among others, to readdress some of those issues in the future. And the next time we have to address it is April 12th at the committee of the whole, and then some future committee meetings. Are there any questions for the administrator? Seeing none, we'll move on to our medical examiner. And I'm so sorry to see that she's joining us today with crutches, but I did meet her driver in the back there, and he's a very fine man,
Yes,
who
he
also
is.
happens to be Patty's husband. So our medical examiner, Patty Shackner.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Just have a few things. Wanted to kind of update you as to where we're sitting so far with the CT scanner. With all the scans we have done, we have saved the county $87,000 in autopsy fees. So I projected that we would kind of break even with paying that back in 5 years. I'm looking now that it'll probably be 2 years. I looked back at our historical data, and our workload from 2007 to now has increased by 207%. So, and we work at the same rate. We have one person on call, 12-hour shifts, 24/7. So our workers are working a lot harder. They have a much larger caseload. And so I hope that when it comes time for budget time, when we talk about some shifting, that huge cuts don't come our way. We have 2 new hires for investigators. They're coming to us with lots of different experience. One of the investigators is from the Alina Health System and is a clinical pathologist, so does hospital autopsies. So that's a new area for us to have an area of specialty. She's an autopsy tech from Alina. The other one is a former Woodbury police officer / paramedic. Both of them live in Hudson, and both come with lots of experience. They're both going to be taking on day shifts. Right now, 50% of the calls are covered by me. And as we look to the future, making sure that we have enough people to cover day shifts, is we want to keep working on the way that we are with an on-call staff, 12-hour shifts we have to start filling. So we have lots of talent here in St. Croix County with forensics. It's really pretty remarkable. We have lots of Hennepin County and Ramsey County technicians that live here, so that are eager to work for us in what we have going on in our DD building. So we're making a name for ourselves, so it's very exciting. I've been asked to present at the WCMEA conference on how St. Croix County came to go with forensic radiology. It's really started a lot of conversations, so I'll be presenting there, and I've also been asked to present at the International Conference of Medical Examiners and Coroners. Senator Staff Schultz will be coming Monday at 2 o'clock, so if you're free, please come. So come a little earlier. We are under construction, so our CT scanner is off right now for construction, but he will be there. Our intern is working on our historical death information, or excuse me, our on an unnatural death data, and is putting together a presentation on what he's found and everything that we have been supplying, all the data we've been supplying him with. We're working with public health on this here topic to really look at drugs and alcohol and how it is impacting our population. For historical death, I'm almost done with the database of the old records. I've got all the records from 1980 to from 1990 to 2011. I have from 1980 to 1990 are the only records I don't have now. So we'll be able to have all of that. It's really quite interesting to see the history of St. Croix County, and now we actually have a live database that deals with all the things that we're statutorily supposed to keep, with all the homicides and the unexpected death. St. Croix County, and I've talked about this before, we have well over 4,000 people in St. Croix County that are classified as morbidly obese. Also, the CDC recently did a study that said by 2035, 41% of all people under the age of 40 will be morbidly obese. How does that impact our work? We have to call fire when we have different situations. It can be someone who has been deceased for days or weeks, and it's a hazardous scene. So we have to call fire to have them come and help us. We call fire for hoarding houses. It's a danger to us and law enforcement at the scene. We call fire for moving someone who is, 250 pounds is heavy. And I respond as a team of one. All of us respond as one. The fire departments now are wanting to be reimbursed when they show up and help. When we call for fire for help, we only need 3 people, but 20 people might show up at the fire hall. They want to be paid for all 20 because that's how they're paid. So this is something that's going to be happening more and more. And when I, look at other counties in this area, there's usually a 50 to 70 pound weight limit. If you have a 400 or 500 pound person, you have to have the manpower to do that lift. Our department operates with one. Law enforcement, it's, asking them to bear the burden, and then we're in hazardous situations. We have body fluids, we have all this here stuff, so it's really becoming more and more prevalent. We're seeing more and more homes where people are living in hoarding type situations, and it's dangerous for everyone involved, not only for things falling on us, but also the possibility of falling through the floors. So calling the fire department to help us is really important, and I think we're going to have to think about this. I'm meeting with the Fire Association in May, but this is going to be something we're going to have to think about and address. So I'm not sure, how this is going to shake out. Like I said, I'll let you know after I meet with them, but it is definitely something that we're seeing a lot. And that I think that's going to be probably the biggest impact that we see as we move to the future. And really, when we think about the public health aspect and obesity and how this is impacting all of the work that we do, it does. And from ambulance cots to cots that we have in our trucks to sizes of people who go in law enforcement, everything is, and you can tell just by what's going on in healthcare. So this is going to be a bigger and bigger issue, and I think we need to be prepared for the obesity issue and how it impacts the work that we do. We are about 10% higher in calls this year. We have 135 people right now actively dying in St. Croix County registered in hospice. And that does not count the folks that do not have hospice. We're also seeing, when it comes to educating people, understanding the difference between palliative care and hospice. And there's a lot of folks that don't understand that if you decide not to go with hospice and you die and you're on palliative care, we're all engaged in that process. Law enforcement, EMS, everybody is engaged. It's very upsetting to families when we all come, but we have a job to do too. So we really have to start having this conversation with our communities about, end-of-life care and why it's important, and how it's not like it was back in the old days where you just called the funeral home to pick up grandma. There is a whole process that we have to go through. And, none of us come to that situation wanting to cause strife with the families, but we have a job to do. And we're working, we had one a couple of weeks ago that there was a lot of conversations that happened, and family was very upset that they had to call 911 and that everybody showed up. But that is what we have to do, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the person that is responsible signing the death certificate is our office, which means the county is responsible, that we get it right. And we can't rush that. We have to do it right. We have to get the diagnosis. We have to find out what's going on. We have to do all that stuff. And even though it's natural and appears to be natural, we don't know that. Law enforcement doesn't know that. And the ambulance doesn't know that. So if you don't have your DNR and you don't have hospice and you don't have these things, we have to do our job in that. I will be talking, I'm doing a couple more of the planning ahead classes. I have one scheduled with a church in New Richmond and then another one in Somerset. But I think that is really going to be a focus, is really getting out in the public and talking about planning ahead, because that will make all of our jobs a little bit easier. It's just very stressful for all of us to go into what we know. And some of these people might be people we know, then we know they have a terminal illness, but they still have hope, so they haven't signed up for hospice. And then when that happens, then we have a job to do. So other than that, that's all I have.
I had one quick question. Patty, could you define palliative care?
Palliative care basically is saying, I still have hope that this isn't terminal. I mean, you get cares, it's not covered, like hospice, there's basic hospice that is covered under Medicare, and palliative care is a different lane. That's not my area of expertise, but palliative care does not mean hospice. And hospice is an order given by a doctor that they have less than 6 months to live. And then that starts the whole process.
Questions for Patty? Supervisor Carlson.
You mentioned fire departments want to be reimbursed, and they probably should be. When we do our budget, I'd like to see a line item.
Okay.
Would you expect that, because that seems to be an easy way to solve it, so it's off your table.
Okay.
Yeah, it's regarding the fire departments though, when there's a fire call on the side of a highway because a car's on fire, the client is the car that's on fire. The client is the client's not the county. It's not the ME's office. So if they need to bill, we totally understand that, we can be cooperative with them, but it would be who the ultimate client is. Yeah, yep.
I would also, going back to the good news part of your presentation, the first part, we're apparently doing very well on the payback of the expenditure for the forensic equipment. Could you just add a couple more sentences on that? Because that was the good news portion.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to be meeting with a couple of other counties that have shown interest but there's a whole process we have to get up to speed. There is an expectation that if we're going to offer this, that we are at the beck and call of these other counties. And that is not part of, right now, our people on call's job. So we came into that a couple weeks ago with a different county, and they called us to come and do pickup, to do the scan. They wanted us to do all the blood draws and everything and we're like, no, that is not what we do, and we do scans during normal business hours. So when I talk about, how we're going to readjust our budget, I can see us making some changes so we can collect more money and do more business, but we have to have the right system set up ahead of time. And I think once we get it set up, we're going to be very busy. And it will be very positive for us at St. Croix County. But our primary goal is to make sure that the residents of St. Croix County and the deaths that we investigate in St. Croix County are covered first before we start taking care of everybody else. So I didn't think that they would be that needy, but they are. And we did add another line in our fees to take on, revenue that we're bringing in. So you can see in the fees that we have another line in there that we brought in $4,500 already from other counties. So I can see that that's going to be a big improvement, but we have to relook at how we're going to handle that service.
And one last item, and I'll ask Patty to comment on this as well, but in January, when you addressed the committee, you mentioned the shocking number of young people, particularly, who you were seeing with cirrhosis of the liver and alcoholism. And that led to discussions with the Health and Human Services Department, Bob Barrett and his staff and others. And the result of that has been the evolution of a program that will be held on May 17th in New Richmond at the Technical College. I believe it's scheduled for 5 to 7 or 5:30 to 7:30.
5:30, 7:30.
And Patty's been very active in the planning for that and will be on the program. And I'm hopeful that somebody has spoken to the sheriff about inviting him to be on the program. If they haven't, somebody will be in touch with you about that. And but that's been a very interesting evolution of that program, and I think Judge Nordstrom will also be joining us to give he's the judge that handles the treatment court and sees people that are having treatment issues all the time. But Patty, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, yeah, we know that the alcohol problem is really the largest addiction problem that we have, and we're seeing it, but a lot, and we're seeing it in younger people and with lots of trauma. And one of the things that we're looking at with our people that are dying, medically or accidentally, is were they in the system before? Is this like they've been living with addiction their entire life, or were they in our system somewhere? And how do we address that issue? It really doesn't know an education level. It doesn't know a income level. It just, we are seeing it all over the table. And then when we had a young mother who passed away, and she had 3 kids, and all 3 kids had fetal alcohol syndrome. So that there is the future to what goes on in the rest of this committee. So addressing alcoholism as a healthcare issue is really going to be a big deal, and I think this is a perfect way to make that stepstone so we can start having that conversation.
And I would just add that our May meeting is actually a joint meeting with the Health and Human Services Board at this alcoholism symposium. So that's our plan for now, and if there's some other contingency that comes up, we can always reschedule a formal meeting of this committee, but that's our plan as of now. And Greg Telejohn and that committee have been very helpful. And I know one of our goals from this is not just to have a discussion of the problem, that'll set the scene that there's a huge problem, but we also want to have at least 2 or 3 takeaways that for the future. What are we going to do? And what's the way ahead with some real action items? So I know that Bob and his staff and others are working on that, and hopefully this will be a beneficial conference for St. Croix. Are there any other questions for Patty? Thank you. I'll next call on Judge Needham, and he can cover the courts and the CJCC, and then I'll call on Phil Galley to follow Judge Needham.
Take up the courts first. Not a lot to report. I wasn't aware of the influence of this committee until this morning, because this is the first morning the building hasn't been shaking. They removed the retaining wall and are now starting the work on the north side, and it certainly drove home for Judge Waterman and I what Judge Nordstrand and Judge Vlack had been facing on the other end. But the project's getting done, and we're working through it. But when your entire bench shakes, you know that something is going on. With that said, I I think you're aware that 2 constitutional amendments did pass regarding changes to the Constitution that will impact on how judges approach setting bail. I know there was some reporting in some of the newspapers down south that they thought it would exponentially increase jail populations. Currently, under the current Constitution, the only consideration that we are to use in setting bail for someone who's been arrested is their likelihood to return to court. The new amendment now adds a number of other considerations that judges can use to make that determination. In talking to my colleagues, I don't think it's going to change a lot of what's happening in St. Croix County. We've not been violating the Constitution, but we've been, I think, in some ways, using those same considerations to say, is that person likely to come back to court? So I guess for us, it may change what arguments the attorneys advance to us, but I don't see a significant sea change in terms of the numbers of people arguably who are going to be subject to cash bail, because I think, as I said, many of the considerations that are now constitutionally entrenched have been used to determine, again, whether someone's likely to return to court. Those new constitutional amendments, I understand, take effect upon certification of the election, which I think is going to be probably within the next couple of weeks. So we will, again, be implementing those changes as we set bail going forward. We meet quarterly with various other stakeholders, Sheriff's Department, the Clerk of Courts, the District Attorney and Public Defender, and HHS. And out of those meetings, we have come up with at least a couple of things that are happening. With our meeting with HHS, we concluded that it might be useful to bring in a set of fresh eyes and ears to help us address this child protection crisis that we've been in the last couple of years. And I sit on a statewide committee on child protection, and so we invited 2 of the staff members from the Children's Court Improvement Program in Madison to come up and begin what's called a judicial engagement team, where the judges, district attorney, public defender, social workers, HHS, will collaboratively come up with hopefully some outcomes that will improve communications, improve processing, and improve the overall delivery in the child protection arena. One of the first efforts was a training that was offered here last week. We had 2 staff members come up from Madison to present that training on child protection and child guardianships, and we had over 40 people attend the training. Attorneys, judges, social workers, others involved in the system, so that was really encouraging. In a meeting with the DA and public defender, we have concluded that it would be useful to their offices to have a morning where they can work on briefs, they can work on motions, they can work on other things that, I guess, to this point, they've been working on evenings and weekends, and so the judges have agreed to not schedule any criminal matters Tuesday mornings, which will permit office time for them, office time for Christie's staff who works in the criminal division. And so we're hopeful that that, again, will be something that will be useful going forward. So that is something we're implementing. We have a new district court administrator. He was at our CJCC meeting a couple of weeks ago. He offices, as you know, right across the hall here. Ross Munns is his name. If you haven't met him, I would encourage you maybe to stop by and say hello. He comes from North Dakota and started his work in the district a few weeks ago. For new members of the committee, St. Croix County is in what's called District 10, and the entire state is broken up into 9 districts, but we're the 10th, and you may ask, how did that happen? Well, they eliminated District 6, but didn't change the numbering. So we're still District 10, albeit there are only 9 statewide. And it includes 14 counties in northwest Wisconsin, all the way from Eau Claire up to Bayfield, from Iron across to Douglas. So it's a huge district geographically. And so Mr. Munns covers those 14 counties. We're really at an advantage having him housed here in St. Croix County. And so again, I thank Mr. Witt and others who were involved in bringing the district office to St. Croix from Eau Claire. We did it in the dark of night, so Eau Claire wouldn't be too excited or disappointed, but we welcome Mr. Munns to St. Croix County, but also to the district. Also, I'll give a shout out to Taylor Mavis and his crew for really accommodating and trying to assist the judges with our parking issues. We were parking in the south parking lot, but with all of the construction on that end, Taylor has found us new spots on the north end. We've had to make a couple of adjustments, but it's not lost on us that the inconvenience that it presents to others, but we really appreciate, again, those particular accommodations. Attorney appointments continue to be an issue, primarily by the Public Defender's Office. We're working with Mr. Sartorius and others to hopefully improve that, but it's a problem getting attorneys appointed and getting them appointed timely by the public defender. Courts are also have a shrinking pool of attorneys who are willing to take court appointments, and so the entire system is constricting, but we're still able to deliver justice services, but it is a challenge. Christy's not on the agenda, but she continues to have some staffing issues. She's hired 3 new people in the last month or so, but had another resignation, so 2 people down. I think she's hopeful that with some interviews, she may have some viable candidates, but I think what's lost is the amount of training that it takes to get someone in her office up to speed. It is incredible the amount of knowledge that those people have to have and the expectations that they have to meet for that job. And so retention, I think, is a huge issue for her office. We're hiring new people, but the training program is close to a year before I think people are up and ready to work independently. And so that continues to be a theme that we're addressing with her and trying to come up with ways to retain staff. Mr. Anderson not on the agenda, but he's hired a new ADA, which is good for all of us. She joins us from the Public Defender's Office out of Spooner. She is by background from the Netherlands and came to the United States as a child, and we met her the other day, and she begins on Monday, so we welcome his office, I think now fully staffed, and the public defenders continue to be 2 down. That kind of completes the courts update. I'll let Phil jump in on CJCC, and then I can supplement if necessary.
Sure, thank you, Judge. So just a couple quick items to recap from our March 16 CJCC item, excuse me, CJCC agenda. The first is regarding justice support, and these are some new numbers that I didn't have back in March, but for the first quarter of 2023 for pretrial, just some numbers that Shelby runs for us, appearance rate, arrest-free rate, and violence-free rate for our pretrial folks. They continue to be really strong, so our appearance rate, so for folks returning to court, is 96%. That's probably the largest number I've seen quarter over quarter since I've been here, a full 10 months. The arrest-free rate is 93%. Again, that's strong. Anything above 90%, I mean, we want it to be closer to 100, of course, but that's good. And then the one that's, I think, the best, if you want to call it that, is the violent arrest-free is 100%. So folks that are out on pretrial are not getting rearrested on violent crimes. So that's something to take. Just one other update with pretrial. In the first quarter, we serviced 206 different clients. Those aren't necessarily ongoing, but folks maybe in and out that came and went with our case managers. And we conducted 101 public safety assessments over that quarter. So to piggyback off of what Judge Needham had said, some changing legislation regarding bail, that won't necessarily change our PSAs. Our public safety assessment is what we submit to the courts every morning to inform bail decisions. But we're doing a lot of those, and we anticipate we'll continue to do those. So that's great work that our 3 pretrial case managers do. So we're really, I just continue to be very happy and impressed with the work that they do. The other thing I just want to note is additional responsibilities of our pretrial case managers. Back in January, we started running our cognition group for the county, so our MRT, which is moral recognition therapy. So treatment court clients, pretrial, diversion, we are running those groups Wednesday evenings in New Richmond at the Services Center. So the idea is to help people kind of look at their criminal thinking errors and look at those things differently and change those, because hopefully if we impact criminal thinking, we can impact crime down the road. So those groups are going really, really well. So those are the 2 updates that I had from CJCC. Judge, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, just a couple. There is a mental health summit that the Chief Justice Ziegler, has formed. That summit is on April 21. St. Croix County is sending a team made up of Judge Waterman is going, and then I believe we have law enforcement representation. The sheriff is going, HHS is going. Bob Rarrett has been on the committee that the Chief Justice formed that helped organize all this. So that's one thing that's coming up, and that certainly is a timely topic and will continue, I think, to drive much of what happens, unfortunately, in the criminal justice system, and that's the intersection of mental health and crime. We're also going to be forming a new subcommittee of CJCC, and that will deal with child protection issues. And so Phil and I and the executive committee will be looking at kind of a description of that committee, but also who might be good members for that committee. And I think that kind of supplements other things that happened in March. We had presentations by one of the organizations who we're partnering with to look at our pretrial system, and they brought in a woman who, and I can't recall, had 30 plus arrests in her lifetime, was addicted, but came from a stable family, which again, there was somewhat of a contradiction in what we oftentimes see. But Phil and she did an exchange about what was useful in pretrial for her. She now is a peer support person and has come out of the system in a positive way. So that was really, I think, informative to the body of the CJCC to hear someone who's been in the system and now is giving back through public speaking as well as helping in Illinois, which is where she came from, in their pretrial system. So those are some other things. We welcome Supervisor Adams also to our CJCC meeting. He subbed for Supervisor Fiedler, and so I certainly invite any other members of this committee to attend our CJCC meetings. I think he was hopefully pleasantly impressed and surprised by what we get done in that body. So,
Are there any questions for Judge Needham or Phil Golly?
Well, just a comment, Chair Long brought up your article at our county board meeting. I'd like to reiterate that and just bring it up as a point, and thank you. And any comments you had about it or anything?
No, it was just a nice collaborative effort with the folks from Child Support. And as Judge Needham had brought up, this new task force for CJCC, getting that article, it's very timely for a number of reasons for us, but I think for the state as well. So yeah, Lisa, thank you, and Gretchen as well. It was nice to work with them. Yeah, I think this is it'll be a nice effort, and so if there's anyone who has recommendations for our subcommittee, Judge and I would love to hear those. And yeah, we'll be having some language put forth to develop the subcommittee, and we'll get that in front of the entire body in May. Thank you.
Lisa Plunkett, the Child Support Administrator, is here also. She missed it at County Board, so thank you for bringing it back up, Supervisor Ramberg.
Thank you.
I would just raise one quick thing. I know Judge Waterman, if you had any comments on, okay. I did attend a meeting on Monday that Judge Waterman chairs on criminal justice, and we had a nice presentation from Phil's office by Shelby that is a continuation of Phil's office's efforts to bring together a lot of statistical data on criminal justice in St. Croix County, and that was a very nice new development. And we can probably continue to gather different types of information that will be helpful to this committee and to the full board throughout the year, and with the idea that, again, next year, by January, we can have a fulsome statistical picture of what's happening in the criminal justice system in St. Croix County. So I want to thank Phil and Judge Waterman for their efforts in that. If there's no other questions, we'll go to treatment court funding sources. And Phil?
Yeah, I can speak to that, and I know Judge Nordstrand isn't here. So just wanted to provide a quick update. So in treatment court, we've changed a little bit, evolved, I guess is probably the best way of saying it. We historically have used Health and Human Services Behavioral Health as our treatment provider. Back in December, we pivoted, and it really just was because of some staffing challenges that they've had. So with that has created some challenges for us. We're moving along nicely. I will kind of lead with we had to pause accepting folks into treatment court, but we've reopened now, and we're doing well there. We have a number of folks that we've re-entered into the program as we graduate folks, and we have some others that we're screening for admission. But one of the unique challenges, and this is something that I know is dealt with across the country, when somebody goes to jail or prison and they are on medical assistance, oftentimes their health insurance is paused during that period of time. And the question I have is, I don't know how it's determined. I don't know how Medicaid determines people are incarcerated, especially if it's for a short period of time. Regardless, that poses a unique challenge for us as we try to screen and admit people into treatment court. We get about half of our referrals, so 10 or 12 per year on average, from folks who are in the jail. So they come to us, they are on a probation hold, something to that effect. Well, part of the admission process is for us to get them screened, so an assessment. That assessment can't be paid for unless they have medical insurance, so it's kind of one of those catch-22. So we've come up, I want to thank the sheriff has done a couple transports for us. So for folks that are in the jail, the court services has transported them to Programs for Change, who is our new provider. That's been very helpful, but that's not sustainable for us. It's not sustainable for anybody. So we need a longer-term solution. Behavioral health, I've worked with Charlotte Lopez on this a little bit, and I think we've come up with a temporary, maybe even more of a permanent solution to this, where they can provide, behavioral health can provide like an initial screening for us. We can get them, if they're eligible, entered into the program, so we can kind of start the ball rolling, and then we can work with Programs for Change, our new provider. It's going to create it's going to be a little choppy. It's going to be kind of 2 steps instead of just one. But for right now, it's what we have to work with based on this, like I said, this hurdle of folks going to jail and losing their medical insurance. So we're working through that right now. I think, like I said, we have a solution, but more to come as we move forward over the next few months on that.
Questions for Mr. Gawley? Thank you, Phil. The next item on our agenda is a little bit unique for this committee. It's an ordinance creating Chapter 37, a uniform addressing system. I'm going to call on several different people for explanations of what's happening here, and also call on one of the parties that could be affected by it, Corey Toomey, in just a moment. But just to set the scene, can I call on Heather to just mention what we're trying to do?
Yes. So since 1983, the county has had an addressing system in place, and Brett Boudreau or Terry Anderson can speak more about the specifics of that. The statutes, Wisconsin Statute 59.54, paren 4, which is under the public protection and safety category in the statutes, indicates that the county may establish a rural naming and numbering system. So basically a road naming and addressing system that's uniform throughout the county in towns. Obviously cities and villages have their own process to name roads and address them. So for the last 40 years, we've been operating on this without any formal ordinance. Recently, an issue came up, and so staff started researching what this ordinance should look like. And so we looked at other counties to see what other counties have passed and adopted, and then we drafted this Chapter 37, the Uniform Addressing System, to address naming roads and addressing those houses going forward. So I can answer any specific questions, but this is the outline to have that process in place. In addition, we didn't have any appeal process in place, so if community development decided to change an address, there was no appeal process. And so this ordinance does allow, if someone does not agree with an address change, that they can appeal that decision to this body within 30 days of that decision. So that's found on page 6 of the draft ordinance. There has been discussion about who should be the body that addresses appeals, but since this ordinance is allowed to be adopted under public protection and safety in the statutes, staff felt that this would be the most appropriate body to address an appeal of that decision. Really, if you look at the first paragraph of the ordinance, which addresses the purpose of this ordinance is to provide a means and standards for the most rapid location of property by emergency services providers, including medical services, fire department, law enforcement, other first responders, and then it also guides the U.S. Postal Service in delivery of packages of mail. And so those are the primary purposes of this ordinance, is to ensure that the grid system is consistent, and so that the first responders and medical providers and fire departments are able to locate where people live.
Are there any questions of Heather at this point? If not, I would just observe, I think it's a very well drafted ordinance. I've certainly got no problem with it as drafted for the purposes for which they're stated. I'll just reiterate that in 3705, it says the policy implementation will be with this committee. And Part B of that section says the administrative responsibility shall remain with community development. And as I understand it, that committee has also considered this extensively previous to this.
We had an agenda item on their last agenda that just indicated their support to bring an ordinance forward to this body. So as you indicated, 37.05 administrative responsibilities are actually with the Community Development Department, not the committee. And that is because Brett Boudreau and staff in Community Development, they maintain the maps and the addresses and then work with the Sheriff's Office and Emergency Management and Communications if there's an issue. Because all that information needs to be uploaded. There's a big project going on right now, I understand, that's on the agenda, of putting all these addresses into the 911 system so that the first responders and emergency personnel and Sheriff's Office are able to locate the houses, and Terry will speak more to that.
Now, Community Development did request that the appeal be to a joint meeting of the Public Protection and Community Development. We did not draft the ordinance that way. We thought that was a little clunky, but just for full disclosure, they had requested that it be done that way.
I'm going to call on Mr. Boudreau in just a second. I've got a frog in my throat here. For any further comments that he'd like, join us up here at the table if you'd like. And then I'll call on Mr. Toomey. But I was also going to just observe that since we're getting this for the first time, and it may or may not have gotten wide dissemination, that I was going to ultimately, I think, suggest to the committee that we'd use today's meeting as a discussion time, time to understand the ordinance, time to hear from those who are affected by it and the background to it, as we hear from Mr. Boudreau, and perhaps defer any action item on it till our next meeting. I understand from discussions that there's not an emergency right now, and that we could do that without affecting anything too much. And then at our next formal meeting, we could address it formally for action. Does that seem satisfactory with the committee? So I'll call on Mr. Boudreau at this point for any comments you'd like to make from community development's perspective, and then I'll call on Mr. Toomey.
Yeah, Chair Fiedler, committee, thank you. So this ordinance, as Heather said, will clarify the authority of the county to assign address and road names in the unincorporated areas for public protection and service delivery. CDD has been implementing the address and house numbering system in cooperation with the towns since at least the 1980s. We've also been working with Emergency Support Service and Sheriff for that time period, providing paper maps, blue map books for many years that went out in all the vehicles, and now digital data, geographic information systems, address points, and center lines. So during that time, there has been a couple of different instances when an ordinance was thought about and we didn't get this far, so I appreciate the development of an ordinance. Again, I'm happy that this ordinance is coming forward to clarify the authority and provide property owners an appeal process, so that's good. Regarding this address change for the Toomeys and Ericksons, I apologize to them and sorry for the disruption that it's caused for everybody. With new so at the end of their road is a new subdivision that's coming in with 4 new lots. And our process has been when additional lots are added at the end of this road, we should rename that road and address all of the lots that access that road off of the new road name. So we were following that procedure. And then I guess during this process, just the importance of an ordinance and moving forward to make sure that we have a communicative process for everybody involved.
Thank you, Brett. Oh, absolutely. Our corporate counsel, Ms. Amos.
We do have in Chapter 13 of our ordinances naming conventions for roads and addresses when there are new subdivisions. And so that's a separate process than Chapter 37, and I just want to clarify that. When there's new subdivisions, the information is the same, and the way the naming and the road naming and the addressing occurs and is the same, but there's a separate process in Chapter 13 when there's a new subdivision. So I just want to clarify that. That is mentioned in this Chapter 37 ordinance.
I think one of the pieces of information that would be helpful for Brett to explain too is, you know, how a driveway becomes a private road to a public road. You know, I thought, well, why would we have ever have let a road with 2 houses on it? But he can explain how that sort of comes about. And it's not necessarily the case here, but it is typical across the county. So these types of situations do arise. If you want to maybe explain that evolution.
Sure.
Yeah, across the county, as the years have gone on, many times we have a joint driveway with 2 houses on this joint driveway. It's a private driveway. Somebody decides to build a 3rd house on that private driveway, and for many years then that private driveway would become a public road, necessitating that address change, because previously they would have been addressed off of the public road with those 2 houses on the private driveway. You add the 3rd or the 4th house when it becomes a public road, now it gets a name. And it's a similar situation to this situation. So we had 2 houses being addressed off of one road, and now additional houses on the end of that subdivision in that cul-de-sac.
Thank you for that. If there's no other questions for Brent or, oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Ramberg.
One of the things from my experience years ago, and this, I don't have any facts about this, but it's with my father and folks that in the rural area growing up, that in order to pay their taxes in the towns, people had to drive to the treasurer. And if they had a long driveway, they couldn't get there. And I'm assuming that the town then would plow it for them and maybe even took it over at some time in the past. And some of the towns are struggling with that now that that situation doesn't exist anymore, but you have little spikes of roads to one house. And I'm assuming that's how it became that way. But now towns are struggling to get rid of that or to abandon it, and that's quite a process as well. But just to throw that in there too is, you know, when you squint your eyes and think, how did that happen? That's my view of how things have happened, viewing it from afar. But just a point to bring up as we move forward through this process, and I appreciate Chair Fiedler's point to bring it on, because I'd like to absorb this, gather more information, talk to the towns that I represent, see what they know about it, what their comments are, et cetera. So I appreciate us cussing and discussing as we go. Thank you.
Eloquently stated. Any other comments? So I'd like to welcome Carrie Toomey. Carrie, if you'd like to go to the microphone there. And Amy, I don't know if it's self-evident there. It's on? Okay. It should just work. And welcome to the committee.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So I am Corey Toomey, and Laura, my wife, and I have lived at 1467 24th Street now for the last 10 years. My neighbors, Jason and Tammy Erickson, have lived in St. Croix County their entire life. And they built that house from when it was brand new, and they've been in it ever since. I do have permission to speak on their behalf today as well. I just want to start off by, we're proud to live in St. Croix County. Okay, we appreciate every single one of you guys. If it wasn't for you, it wouldn't allow us to give back to the community. My wife's a nurse, so she takes care of the people of the community, and I provide technical services to businesses throughout the area. So you guys being here allows us to go give back, so we appreciate that. Why I'm here, I do oppose the address change of 1467, 1465 on 24th Street. There's lots of reasons why, but we're asking to be grandfathered in. One of the reasons is just the cost associated with it. One of the things of being proud of living in the county, we have our home address bricked into the front of our home. We also have our home address bricked into the pillar at the end of our driveway. And I also have a custom-made mailbox that's seasonal that I put up every summer. That's CNC cut 1467, and it lights up when it gets dark out. So very proud of our home, our street. We have a lot of money invested in our address, right? And that's just brick and mortar and mailbox, but just I can't even talk, the things that would be involved in changing your address, right? So just looking at everything that would have to change in the time associated with that. Spent a lot of time coming to the community development meetings. Being here today, I'm taking time out of work to be here. Just kind of making sure that not only are we protecting ourselves, but people maybe in the future that are going to have to go through this. So basically, when it started, we received a letter in the mail probably a few months back stating that our address would be changing, and thank you for our cooperation. I remember that day because I'm just thinking like, whoa, hang on a second, like this is a big deal, right? So you start really thinking through what that's going to change. You look at the cost that's associated with us. Anyway, we're fortunate enough to, yes, a development went in. Bob O'Brien's my neighbor. We're fortunate enough to be able to purchase 2 of those lots. I know the buyers of the other 2 lots. It's going to remain raw land. Can't promise that indefinitely, of course. I'm not going to be alive forever. So it's really about coming up with a solution for the future, right? And we would like maybe an alternative solution of numbering, one address, but numbering differently A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, northwest, east, south, whatever that looks like. But yeah, that's all I really have to say. But it's been, I'll add one more thing, just for the Ericksons. They've been impacted for whatever reason more than us. But when the address change first went through, it was reversed. And in that reversal, it deleted our 2 addresses. So we're missing mail, we're missing packages. We spent hours talking with USPS, UPS. Every single time we order something, we got to call in. It's changing our address to the new address, which isn't our address in my head. We don't have a street sign up, with the new address. I don't have a fire sign with that new address. So that's why it was kind of reversed, because it was kind of jumped. They kind of jumped the gun a little bit, in my opinion. Yesterday, we're talking with the USPS investigator, and she asked if we had just built our homes. So, the houses have been there for 25 years. So we're running into that now, and again, that was just yesterday. I was sitting at the dinner table with my neighbor, and we're talking through how do we move forward. It's going to be a while before who knows what we're missing and this and that. So anyways, a little bit about what we've been dealing with. But again, appreciate everybody here. Thank you for hearing me out, and we appreciate every single one of you. So thank you.
Any questions for Corey? Okay, any observations?
Thanks for coming in and explaining the predicament. I'm wondering how many, we know it's these two families, but what's the potential impact of others in the county related to this?
Related to this specific issue, no. It's just these two individuals. The ordinance in general would affect everybody. I don't know if there's any other issues that have come up recently, but obviously we've changed addresses in the past.
Is that your question?
Yeah, and Brett may be able to answer that.
Yeah, like how often is this going to potentially come up
Yeah,
outside of this?
right. With the ordinance going into place, there's a couple places where it says that the ordinance would not change any existing road names or addresses due to the adoption of the ordinance itself, just the adoption of it. There are other places where a private road or a road with addresses on it that are addressed off a different road where the ordinance could be applied then to change street names and address numbers. But I don't know, have a specific count, and we would certainly look at that completely and thoroughly before we implement any changes.
Maybe the frequency of how often you end up changing an address in the county? I mean, is it like once a year? Is it 5 times a year? 100 times a year?
I would say a couple times a year. I have quite a few letters in our files of address changes that have gone through. Many times they're sometimes due to jurisdictional transfers of roads. In Holton itself, there were quite a few changes there when Highway 35 was rerouted. County Road M out of River Falls became a town road, so that required address changes.
And Supervisor Fiedler, we will need a motion to postpone to the next hearing date and a second in order to move the ordinance to the next.
I'll do that in just one second. I'll ask for that. I just also wanted to thank Mr. Toomey and the Ericksons for their being with us today. You suggested a creative solution. I know I've chatted with staff on other creative solutions, and we'll try to work forward on that over the next reasonably short period of time to bring this to a head in a thoughtful manner. And now, would somebody like to bring a motion to defer to the next meeting?
I didn't know if I should have a motion for it. I have a couple more points or questions, if I may.
Fire away.
Just to throw some thoughts at the wall, points to ponder as we move forward from, again, my experience in the highway department. I'm guilty of changing County Trunk Highway M to a town road. We sold it to the town, so we removed some of our responsibility way out down there. I thought that was exciting, but one of the consequences is this, and it brings some thought to me that I'd like to continue to think about and to bring to this committee. One of the things I remember is other counties use dual signage on their roads, I noticed, where some towns back, I think when this was adopted, some towns did not go with the address system. 'Cause I was pretty excited when I found out I lived on 222 Street, and I tell people I live 22.2 miles from Minnesota, ha! You know, and so when I worked at UPS, you kind of knew driving down the road that you had 2 miles to go when you'd see the roads up there. But that gets to be long, you know, Schmuckatelli Drive / 220th, so that gets to be a long sign. But I don't know if that's palatable as we move forward. And two, we had enhanced 911, and I think they know where I am when I'm in my field calling. It's pinpointed, I think, right where I'm at. You know, and one of my thoughts is, can that get incorporated into the addressing system with longitude, latitude type pins or something like that? Just a thought. You know, going on to the GPS thing and APC. When I turn off I-94 in Baldwin, it says I'm on 10th Avenue, not 63. You know, things like that. There's a GPS connection maybe, a longitude, latitude in enhanced. Just some points that I'd like to bring up. If we could investigate behind the scenes if those possibilities exist with our current software. And again, I think some of the consequences that were related is these darn jurisdictional transfers that we did. The state did that jurisdictional transfer over there, and they gave us, or they sold us, or gave us the road and then paid us to take it so we could improve it. And that, one of the consequences was these other roads took other ownership, and I think that's part of the problem as well. I think one of the things that we want to remember is in these jurisdictional transfers, we should see if we can get the state to help with this kind of thing as part of the jurisdictional transfer, a discussion ahead of time. I think that might help us with some of these burdens that we're having as a consequence. But I just wanted to share those 3 points and then make the motion to delay.
I'll call on
Oh,
Mr.
go
Budo
ahead. I'm sorry.
And I think Terry will be able to address this, but with the enhanced 911, the information from your cell phone, I believe, does come back now and will show up on the map. That's part of the process, so that is available. Yep.
So with that, I'll call on Supervisor Ramberg.
Motion to postpone to the June meeting since we're having the May meeting joint.
A motion is made to postpone the issue to the June
Second.
meeting, seconded by Supervisor Leaf. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We'll defer this item till the June meeting. In the meantime, we'll try to chat with all the affected parties and make sure that that gets dissemination to the various interested parties in the county so they can comment as well. With that, thank you again, our Corporation Counsel and Brent and Mr. Toomey. Our next item on the agenda, we have 2 items, emergency management and emergency communications updates. I imagine that's going to be Terry Anderson, or Natasha. I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't see Natasha. Patty, you were directly in line with Natasha. I'm sorry, Natasha.
Mine's just a couple minutes, so I'll just go real quick. Oh, you can? You can pull up the National Weather Service one. So Natasha Cardinal, good morning, St. Croix County Emergency Management. I'm just going to take a couple minutes and share some flooding information resources with you guys as we have our spring thaw melt. Yeah. So it's for planning purposes and just to provide some insight and the probability of the river rising and melting snow and ice. What's that? Oh, you're on the, okay. So Adam helped me create a web page that's out on the county web page. If you look under emergency management, you can find it there as well. But under that web page, you'll find a couple resources. One is a link to the National Weather Service 2023 Spring Flood Outlook web page. It's a really interactive web page that provides flood factors, climate predictions, center outlooks, 7 to 10 day weather forecasts, and spring outlook graphs. And there's also an advanced hydraulic prediction interactive map at the bottom of the web page. And that was the one that kind of, if you're interested, it's okay. I'll just explain it. I'm not going to sit and take you for it, but that's okay. I mean, if you go to the link we have on our webpage, you'll find it. At the bottom, though, there's a probability interactive map that will kind of explain over the next 2 weeks when our river will hit minor, major, moderate flood stages. It's predicted right now, looking at it as it'll send an update every 24 hours that by the 10th, it will look like it's a 50 to 75% chance of hitting minor to moderate, and then by the 24th, it'll kind of peak. So what we've done, I've shared this on our webpage, and then we also created an emergency management flooding resources link that has information for all municipalities, businesses, residents, which I sent out yesterday to all municipalities and kind of explained emergency management stance on if in the event that we're to get really bad. But there is a lot of helpful information on that web link that will describe what to do before, during, and after a flood, along with resources to include information on insurance, floodplain maps, flood hazards, recovery toolkits, sandbagging brochures, safety measures, and how to stay informed. and in the event it gets bad, what that would look like as far as calling in damage and reports for emergency management. Like I said, I sent that out to all the municipalities yesterday. The county does not provide sandbags and sand, so they'll have to reach out to their local public works departments. The city of Hudson does. I have been in touch with the city of Hudson and North Hudson, and they do provide sandbags for those residents because they seem to get on Front Street flooded every few years where they can't get into their driveways up that road. But we're staying in touch with the city, and right now they're just kind of monitoring, and they're going to reach out and let us know if they need any help or resources, and we're just monitoring at this point. Anyone have any questions?
Questions for Ms. Cardinal?
Thank you.
Excuse me, I did have one quick question. I'm sorry, I just thought of it just as we were, earlier we had discussed, when you were with us a couple of months ago, the possibility of later in the year doing an emergency exercise. And we've talked about that, and Supervisor Adams and yourself are coordinating that, and he's been doing a good job on that, and so have you. Would you have any updates on relative timing for that, or anything else you'd like to share with us on that?
I don't have any updates on an exercise yet. I know that we're talking about it and kind of hoping, we'll see what happens with Janet maybe coming back and where we'll be at. But we do have, I do have some others planned with municipalities that probably wouldn't be of so much of interest. But if we're looking at doing something potentially later this summer, this fall with the sheriff's office, it's not on the timeline or on the calendar yet, but that's kind of where we're projected, is later summer, early fall.
Okay, thanks for the update.
Yep.
Will Terry be giving the next presentation on the Next Gen 9/11 update?
Good morning. So, over the course of the last few years, there's been a process ongoing for transitioning to the Next Gen 911. Back in 2016, the state began the process of communicating with all the 911 centers in the state of Wisconsin of moving to this new platform called Next Gen 911. What that means is that the state builds out they call it the EZNet network. It's a Emergency Services IP network. Currently, we reside on a late 1980s to early 90s platform. We receive our 911 on copper lines. Some of us in the state have transitioned and split from copper and fiber. We do it both, 3 circuits on each line, so we have some redundancy in our system, which has benefited us over the last few years. But again, back in 2016, this journey began with learning what this Next Gen 911 is. The state of Minnesota transitioned to this network in the Next Gen world about 5-6 years ago, if memory serves right, so I've been paying attention and learning from how they have done their business over there. Currently, the system is referred to as a legacy network. You'll hear me refer to that as being a legacy network. And since 2014, here at the county, all of our 911 systems that we have purchased have been compatible with the standards needed for Next Gen 911. You may ask what the advances are, or the pros, the advantages are for the county of doing this. So right now, when you hit the last digit or hit send on your wireless device for 911, you'll hear a click, and then you can count on in your head 8 seconds before it hits the 911 center. And trust me, I can hear the raw 911 line before we pick up, and the people think that it's not going anywhere. We'll hang up once in a while. Probably 5 to 6 times a year I capture that. But in the new world, when we've been testing, it's down to 2 seconds from when you hit that last digit that the phone hits us in the center. And the reason it takes so long is because it's antiquated equipment, and it's processing, gathering from your phone number who the owner is, what the number is, where they are. The current system triangulates off of cell towers. So it's an approximation. There's a confidence number that's given with a 911 call when it's a wireless device. In the new world, it goes to latitude, longitude, like Supervisor Ramberg had indicated, but also with that, it brings with it the GIS. going in the Brett's world of GIS. There's a national, because we're stepping out of the state of Wisconsin and going national. So when you dial 911 and it pinpoints where you are, being on the national system, it has to know that road segment is in St. Croix County, in Wisconsin, in whatever township or whatever municipality. So we have to adopt their nomenclature of how the roads are named. The abbreviations like lane doesn't exist anymore. Currently, some of them have LA for lane or LN for lane. We have to have the whole word spelled out, which brings us into Brett's world where he has to go in and adjust stuff to be proper in the new world that we're stepping into. So there's some work that had to be done on the GIS side of it because they are map layers in our system now. We have to involve them and all of that. The naming is one part. It'll take us in the new world from being anywhere from a quarter, half, 3/4 of a mile of confidence on a wireless device down to 55 feet in the new world when we step into the next gen 911. So that's a benefit huge for us in determining where people are. Also, the redundancy and reliability. Currently, we have our 911 center here at Hudson. We have our circuits for 911 coming in here on 2 pathways. Like I said, copper and fiber, 3 circuits on each line, if you will. It comes into the system here, but we also have redundant 911 server. So it comes into here. Our phones, both here and at our backup center in Hudson or in Baldwin, can answer the phone. It doesn't matter which location we are physically at. If something would happen to this facility, we can reroute them 911 calls to 10-digit numbers in Baldwin and still function invisible to the callers as to what's going on. We may not get all that data because it's not coming in on a 911 circuit out there in current world. So there is a little deficiency. In the new world, there's 2 redundant circuits coming in here on fiber. 2 in the Hudson, and then there'll be 2 in the Baldwin, so that's an advantage. In the pathways that they're coming from the cores in the nation is that it comes on 4 different pathways, 2 at each center. So there's redundancy built into the system again, and I don't have to forward 911 calls if we would have to bug out and go to Baldwin. And again, it's invisible to the world when they're calling. And all the data is provided at either site. If we lose the phone server here in Hudson for some reason, they'll reroute automatically because they're coming in at the same time. The system is smart enough to know if server A goes down, server B is hearing it, and it comes into Hudson, into the comm center downstairs without anybody knowing. So there's redundancy that's built into the system. So there's multiple advantages of that. I referred to 6 core servers. Hurricanes, floods, any of that, there's 6 core servers in the AT&T network. That's who's providing us our 911 phone signal, if you will. They're the one that are providing the 911 calls. They hit, when I said you go to the nation when you make a phone call, the system transfers it, it goes to a core server. If that core server is hit by a hurricane and is for whatever reason offline, there's 5 other cores that will back it up and handle that call. It'll route it through all kinds of servers, routers, switches, getting to us, because there's been numerous tests. The testing we're still in the process of. It was going to be a full week-long process because there's switches and routers here that they had to program and install. But one test alone was 52 phone calls to Pierce County on a 911 transfer. We had to make a test call, and then I had to transfer that call 52 times to Pierce County to make sure all the data made it through. And the reason they had to do 52 was because there's different route switches. They were confirming because there's a team that's on the call with us doing this. There was 10, 11 people that were on the call. And they were verifying that it was going through Miami, Dallas, Kansas City. So it was amazing hearing all that. But it's all part of the redundancy, finding pathways. If one of them goes down, it reroutes. So they were confirming all them routes. It was allowing that IP business through that. One of the other advantages is transfer. The current legacy system for 911, when you're at home, you dial 911, depending on where you live, there's up to 7 different phone companies that you can use in St. Croix County. Current system legacy has to deal with each of them companies individually if there's an issue. They have not been updating their 911 system, so that equipment is becoming very old, and parts for that is becoming. So that's another reason why we need to make the step, going to this next gen 911. Currently today, AT&T only resides in Pierce County and Dunn County. If we have a 911 call for whatever reason, it has to be transferred to them. Them are the only 2 counties that we can transfer and push the address, the location, the caller's registered for that device, their name, and the phone number. And if we have to go to like Polk County, all it is they see our phone number ourselves, and we have to relay all that information. So we have to stay on the line if it's a hot call, so to speak, and make sure they can get all that information out of the caller. And the same goes for anything across the river. We cannot push anything because they're on a different system. So in this new world of the next gen 911, one of the advantages is that we can push all that information to them. And one of the things is the AT&T in the state of Wisconsin has chosen us to be the first in the state of Wisconsin to do this. So it's been slow, not really slow, but it's been a learning because they're building the template of how to do this for other counties. We signed up just like everybody else, but they came to us a year ago, well, it's almost 2 years now, and asked what we wanted to do with Next Gen 911 and the reasons for. And they liked the idea of our backup center. And when I mentioned about having the copper and fiber lines coming in currently, and I'd like to add the trunks coming into the 911 in Baldwin, that they took notice of that and they promoted us up the first to do it. So we're first, we're gonna be the first once they get all the testing done, which will hopefully happen next week. But also
Terry, I was going to say, I think congratulations on being the first. Sounds like it's a pretty exciting project. And I know that your presentation today is being billed as an update. Are there any policy decisions that you think we face in the near future on this, or do you think we've got that pretty well in hand by way of policies that we have now?
Yeah, currently everything in place would not affect anything you have to decide on. So far, it's not costing the county anything to make this transition. There is a small fee for text to 911, which we began in 2015, but in the new world of Next Gen 911, believe it or not, for text to 911 to be recorded, I have to pay a yearly fee for that as well to a third-party vendor. So there is a small fee there. Otherwise, this transition to the Next Gen 911 is not costing the county anything. And there's huge benefits that I feel would benefit the citizens of the county.
Maybe I can ask one quick question on going back to the item. I know you were in the audience for this item 5, the ordinance creating Chapter 37. And one of the purposes of that was public safety in responding to emergencies, that we would have a uniform addressing system. And in regard to your conversation with Supervisor Ramberg, it came out that the new system will have incredible specificity in being able to identify, for emergency purposes, the location of the emergency. Is that generally a true statement?
It is, yes.
And as a result of that, if we were to do something with the addresses that we talked about earlier, with the new system, it would work all perfectly, whether there's pieces of paper that identify it or not. But how often do you think this system that you're describing would be inoperative, not functioning for purposes of, let's say, responding to an emergency that on the new addresses that we might be creating?
Are you
I'm guessing the answer is going to be it rarely would go down, but
yeah, with all the redundancy that's built in the current 911 system is if it has gone, there was maybe a minute where the entire system was down, but we have another layer that we can actually see the caller blip up on our map, so we can call that person back. In regards to the addressing issue, Monthly, currently, we are sending anything that we capture that's wrong on the map, and I say wrong in a way of it either needs to be tweaked or something added or changed to make it better. We send that to the GIS folks, Brett and his team, to update. So there's monthly updates that they're doing. That's going to continue. In the process that Brett and his team have been doing, it has been months they've been working on this, because back in the late 2020, we were at 63% compliance with what the national standard was. And they're up the other day, I believe it was 93% when they did the upload, and they're working with the state, and the state's working with us on how to get to that point. We're getting there, but there won't be, if the outage, very rare, if at all, it'll occur with all the redundancies in place. If there is an outage, it automatically rolls to Pierce County, so they will get somebody automatically. And from 6 trunks that we have now, it'll go to 9 in the new system. And when the 10th caller, should a 10th caller ever call, which has only happened once last year, when the person didn't get anybody, it'll automatically roll to Pierce County.
Thank you for that. Terry, if you've got some additional things, please share them with us. Otherwise, I'll ask if any of the committee members have any questions for you.
The only other thing I'll say is this prepares us for any additional things in the future. You hear talk about video and pictures being shared via 911 from the caller. They can share that. That puts us on a platform to accept this in the new world of Next Gen 911. So the policies within the sheriff's office will have to be looked at and come up, have to be created for some of that information. So, but as always, all this technology is monitored by AT&T. We don't have to do that ourselves, so that's the plus there as well.
Supervisor Ramberg.
Thank you. My new favorite word, nomenclature. It's related, to our previous discussions too, and I'm used to the hierarchy, and you were talking about the spelling, getting back to like 63 is also 10th Avenue, and they want to be consistent, and I guess I'm curious as to the hierarchy. You got interstate, state trunk highway, county trunk highway, and then avenues and streets. What are they gonna? What consistency is coming out of the terms? Because I'd put in CTH for county trunk highway, and it doesn't give me anything.
So the nomenclature we had to adopt. So in the system, it'll present as county road spelled out. It'll be, I believe it's U.S. Highway 12, State Highway 128. It's the nomenclature that is a national standard that'll have to be spelled out. In an instance, like you indicated, Highway 63 and 10th Avenue, all part of that, they have to have the center lines to the point where it transitions to the Village of Baldwin, and they have to be 10th Avenue, and then when it stops at the north end, it transitions back to Highway 63, or U.S. Highway 63.
Thank you. And a follow-up, I know as far as public protection, the Traffic Safety Committee speaks to the Sheriff's Department and the Police Departments entering in the address of an accident, and that would be corresponded, the same nomenclature? Because I can't find in that system just county highways, because County Trunk Highway E is also an avenue.
Yeah, so they're going to be, those are on separate systems. We may run into some, let me rephrase that, we're going to have synonyms built in our system so it can remain as it currently is viewable in our system, but how highway or how the sheriff's office or law enforcement enter in them accident reports, they have a way that, I believe it's a accepted nomenclature they have to abide by doing that. Two totally different systems.
Are there any other questions for Terry? Sam, thank you, Terry. It sounds like a very exciting new time frame ahead for you, and a good one. Sheriff Knudsen.
Thank you. Yeah, the statistics on there for the month, we're going to give you a 30-day snapshot. It's at the end of your packet. So we had I think from February 15th to March 15th, we had 2,500 calls for service. But I'm going to break it down to actually, not break that down, but I'm going to jump to March 31st, which isn't encapsulated in that. And March 31st was the night of the blizzard, from 2,200, from 10 at night till noon the next day on April 1st. We had, and that's not in your packet, 17 accidents. Now, it's how they're coded and put into the system. We had vehicles in ditches. We have traffic complaints where they could be disabled in the middle of the road. We had disabled vehicles. And each one of these calls could have been when we got to, hey, there's a disabled vehicle on this road. We get there and there's 4 or 5 stacked up, because we had a number of areas that once one got stuck, everybody behind them got stuck. I think there was 6, 8, 10 that were stuck on Highway 35 south of Holton, because that road was blowing shut. The highway department did a wonderful job of trying to keep up and trying to get ahead, but as soon as they'd clear it, she'd blow back in. So the highway department's had a rough year this year, but they keep coming out. So our thanks to them as well. And they did help out on a medical as well, to get the ambulance in to a residence. Without the highway department, they wouldn't have got in. So, but some of the numbers was 17 accidents, electrical fires, power line calls. There was 29 of those. 1 injury accident, 1 carbon monoxide detector, but we had 64 that were listed as disabled vehicles. 61 as traffic complaints, 59 vehicles in the ditch. Fire calls was 38. EMS calls was 11. So that was a total of 366 calls for service in a 12-hour period. Comparatively, we took the week before with that same time frame capture, and that was 135 calls for service. So we did 230 more calls for service last blizzard. So all services were very busy. Body cameras. We are getting into installing and implementing new body cams, but also part of that's going to be new dash cams in the squads. That's something that we've not had in a number of years, and with good platform equipment. So we will be getting dash cams in. We hope June or July we get those up and running. So the guys are actually very excited about that as well. We had an emergency detention the other day. I wanted to throw this out again to keep it on everybody's radar. The call started at 11 in the morning, and we got done 21 hours later. The person was cleared medically, locally at the hospital, cleared for transport at 7 p.m. We couldn't get in to start our drive to Winnebago until 12:30. So we sat for 5.5 hours trying to get one of the mental health facilities to accept this person. I just want to keep pushing these disturbing numbers out to keep that at everybody's forefront that it's a mess and something needs to change. And then real quick, in the jail, we were at 103 inmates in today, 9 on electronic home monitoring. Looking at the month, there was 108 for March. That was the average daily population was 108. I see in March, on the 6th, we had 120 we popped up to. So fluctuating, that was the highest for the month, but we've been running in the low hundreds, high 90s for the rest of the month, but we popped up that day for some reason. So that's my update that I have for items.
Questions for the sheriff? Sheriff, we've heard from you for forever about the mental health issues and emergency detentions and that sort of thing. I'm not familiar as of just very recently with what's happening down in Madison on that, but I know you've been working with Bob Barrett and others on that. And would you have any other updates on where you think that's going? I know the governor had a huge new budget increase that he'd proposed in mental health, and I'm just going to assume that some of that might have gone toward issues that you're addressing now, but would you have any further update on that?
I don't have any great updates. What I will say is, you know, I'll go back to as I understand it, what took place with the budget last year, and that they were going to add 22 beds in Eau Claire, and shoved millions of dollars towards that project. And once, I believe, private hospitals, as I'm told, there's no money to be made, and that it's not a great endeavor for private hospitals to take things on like that. So where the money's at from last year, it's sitting somewhere, or it got sent back to Madison. But once again, this half of the state is at the whim of the Madison budget, and it goes to, and I don't think a lot of it is going into adding beds in Winnebago, so that we're able to get in quicker.
Again, I'll try to find out if there's something else happening there and try to update the committee next time we meet. But I know when we had our county ambassadors meeting in January in Madison, and a number of members of the Health and Human Services Board and Bob Barrett, myself, emphasized this to all of our state legislators and assemblymen, and we talked about what had happened last year and what some of the options might be. But of course, their budget process really is now evolving, and the action items start to occur in May and June with a goal of a 1 July budget for the following biennial. But all of them were very sympathetic, and because we're fortunate enough to be running a relatively substantial budget surplus this year, they all expressed the hope that something could be done in this part of the country, and that some of those monies that we thought we were going to get last year might become available this year to us, as Mr. Barrett had proposed about a year ago. So I don't have any specific facts on it, but I'll try to identify some more for us for the next meeting as well. Sheriff.
I just want to add one thing. You know, we had the referendum vote the other day. It was not favorable for us adding staff. We'll continue to push out the statistics on the need for additional deputies and additional help out on the streets, as well as the investigative unit and the jail. Some of the things that I had heard were the reason that people didn't vote for it was that they didn't know even what it was. There was some confusion on what that, not only the wording, but that there was even a referendum. Myself and Administrator Witt and Adam Kostanek had gone out to a number of places, some Rotarian groups, village board meetings, and gave some presentations. We also tried with newspaper articles, river channels. A card was mailed to every place in the county. So absent somebody looking at any of those areas, there were still a number that said, I had no idea this was going on. So how we get that message out, I don't know. The response we got wasn't necessarily, well, it was never, you don't need the help. But it was, all right, how do we pay for this? And that is a reasonable question. But by and large, it was positive responses. One or two public entities were not pushing for it, in favor of it, but I don't think, looking at the numbers, that those few made a huge impact of a sway, because we were not successful in any district. So I think it's the revamping and getting a good message out, and the need is still there. It didn't go away Tuesday night. We still need staffing, There's a number of divisions that need some help in that public safety realm, so we hope to get that someday.
Thank you for those comments. That was the same reaction I got from people as well, just as you characterized it. As I said earlier, we will have an opportunity as a board and members of this committee to address this subject at, 7 days from now, and Wednesday, the 12th of April, at our Committee of the Whole, which will begin the first iteration of looking at our budget for next year. And I know that the administrator has been very receptive to your needs and to needs expressed to him about public safety. And so I sense that we'll be able to do something in the relatively near future, but certainly we'll look at it very seriously over the next several months and put a great deal of emphasis on trying to find the money for those urgent things in public safety. Any other comments, questions for the sheriff? Anything else, sir? That will conclude our business items for the day. Requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, Amy, I don't believe we have any correspondence or announcements to make. Is that correct? Okay. And so with that, at 9:40, we will adjourn this meeting. And our next meeting will be May 17th at the Technical College in New Richmond on the program on alcoholism at approximately 5:30. Thank you.